Hot Chase Oaks! It is great to be here with you today. I want to welcome all of you that are here at the Legacy Campus. My name is Blake, and I'm a teaching pastor here. And I want to welcome everyone at Sloan Creek Campus and our Espanol service, and especially our new named Woodbridge Campus. They have a new name, and I just nailed that. Thank you. And so I want to welcome all of you and everybody online all around the world. I want to thank you for joining us and being a part of this amazing church. I just had lunch with Pastor Jeff this week, and that guy is rejuvenated and alive. He's fired up to come back. He misses you, and he loves you. So keep praying for him as he sort of like studies and prays for what we're going to be learning and teaching about in the next year. And so that guy is amazing. I know you miss him. I miss him. So anyways, I've loved this series. I hope you've loved it. We've been talking about people that are sort of not well known in the Bible, people that are not necessarily rock stars, people that were like just normal, everyday folks, and how we can kind of relate with those people. So in this series, it's called Born to be Wild. And as I was praying about like who in the Bible really was born to be wild, like somebody that was just kind of out of control. There's one dude that I couldn't stop thinking about, and he is just like a guy that could not be tamed, like an untamable dude. And so I kind of think of him as a Tasmanian devil, or maybe a better analogy is a March hare. If you don't know what that is, a hare is a rabbit, and March is their breeding season, and so they, do you understand? They get buck wild. And so the guy I want to talk about today, his name is Samson. And so I'm going to do something that I probably shouldn't do. I just going to read the story to you. And as I read this story, you're going to be invited into my imagination. And that's not always the best idea. So we're going to study this story together. And so I want to just start off by getting everybody to say this. Every campus online, go ahead and say this out loud. Say, we're fixing to get buck wild up in here. Go ahead. We're fixing to get, that's good. That's good. That's good. So this amazing story is found in Judges 13 through 16. And I might say that it's a historical account of a man that's found in the scriptures a long time ago. And it's in these 4 chapters. And as I've been studying and thinking about this guy, he does amazing things. And this guy, Samson, he really was very gifted at making a mess of his life. And he had this one job on earth, and that is to be the deliverer of Israel's people, right? So he's brought to planet Earth to come and deliver the nation from the mighty hand of the Philistines that were always giving them grief. And so how would you like that to start your life out, right? So the first thing we learn is that a man in the form of a body comes as an angel to speak to his mom, Samson's mom, and says to Samson's mom, hey, you're going to have a baby. I know you've been barren, but you're actually going to have a child. And so she goes and tells her husband, like, hey, a man came and told me I'm going to have a child and that the child's going to be a deliverer. And so the man was like, can I talk with him? And so he asks God, and the man comes and talks to him, and sure enough, tells him the same thing. So they are worshiping God, and they want to have a big fire called a burnt offering. They have this massive fire, and as they're sitting there talking with this man, he just like bloop, goes up into the flames and disappears. I want to actually read that to you yourself so you can hear it for yourself. And it says, as the flame blazed up from the altar toward heaven, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame. Seeing this, Manoah, Samson's dad, and his wife, his mom, fell with their faces to the ground. I don't know why I think that's so funny, but I just can imagine standing there talking with some guy around a fire, and then all of a sudden, like, beam me up, Scotty. And so they just like, did you see that? Like, their faces are on the ground, like, yeah, I saw it. I'm scared. Yeah, I'm scared. They're just like prostrate. Like, I get that. That would have messed me up. So he disappears, right? And this angel tells his parents one rule. He had one rule, and that was that this boy is to take a Nazirite vow. A Nazirite vow was typically three things. The first thing was you're never to drink of the fruit of the vine. So you could never have, even a beer around the game, no margarita at Mexican, no alcohol at all, okay? So no drinking alcohol. The second thing was never touch anything unclean. Never touch something that's dead or unclean. So that was the second part. The third one was never take a razor to your hair. So your hair was to grow long and you could never cut your hair. So that's the one rule that Samson knows that he's supposed to fulfill. And Samson comes knowing he's called and chosen by God to be the deliverer for their people. And that's a tough role to carry. Like, Mom, nice to meet you. And she says, good to meet you as well. You're going to be our deliverer. Like, this is what Samson had to wear from the very beginning. And in this amazing account, Samson's accomplishments and his strengths are legendary. But what's probably just as legendary are his weaknesses and his failures, right? And I'm going to tell you something. After studying this and reading commentaries and thinking about this guy, like, there are things in here that I just go, what? And you're going to come to me after this service and say, Pastor Blake, I have a lot of questions. And I'm going to say to you, me too. And it doesn't have like a bow tie on it. And you're going to read things in here. It's like, are you serious? And I'm just going to say, yep, that's what it says. And so I just want to prepare you for that. And I got to tell you that I kind of find myself in this story. I kind of understand because I mess up a lot, maybe like you. And I think you'll probably get the way that Samson lives, right? So he has all this God-given potential. And yet he takes that potential and he continues to make bad decision after bad decision. So there's one thing that I would summarize Samson's life by saying, and that's this. Samson was a physically strong man with a spiritually weak will. He had a spiritually weak will. And I got to tell you, that's a dangerous place to be. He continually was led by the cravings of his flesh and his desires and his needs more than being led by the power and the Spirit of God. And so Samson's sort of known for his needs. He has this constant battle to fall into the temptations and desires and cravings and all these things. This lust kind of controlled his life. And so when we first learn about Samson in chapter 14, verse 1, the very first thing we ever read about him, it's like, what do you like, Samson? What do you think about? Well, here's what it reads. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Well, hi, Samson. Nice to meet you. What are you thinking about? Oh, this girl. So I do want to say one more thing about my imagination. When I think of Samson, I think of him sort of like having Fabio's body, right? But he talks and sounds like and thinks like Mater from Cars. He's like, oh, shucks. So that's Samson. Big body, so that I'm sorry. That's just my well, so he goes and says, I want this girl. She said, I want you to get her, Mom and Dad. And my mom would be like, no. She's a Philistine, so no. And I don't know if you know this, but the Philistines have had us in oppressive slavery for 40 years, so no. But that's not what she says. Mom gives completely different advice than that. She comes up to him. This is what she said. I can't make sense of this. This is just what she said. I messed everything up. Here we go. His father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives? I don't know. Or among all of our people. I know you've got a dysfunctional family. And I know you might think as a father or mother, I sometimes just give my kids the worst advice. But you've never told your kid to date their cousin. I just can't even imagine getting there with my girls. Your boyfriend, I don't like him. You should consider cousin Scotty. What? It's messed up. I'm just reading the Bible. Here we go. So That's his solution. So, Mom, okay, Samson persists. He's like, no, listen, get her for me. She's the right one. And so they go down to Timnah, and on their way there, this crazy thing happens. If this happened to me, I might think, maybe God doesn't want me to do this. Like, maybe I should reconsider. So here's what happens in verse 5 of chapter 14. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came on him in power, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. I'm so glad that they clarified. I rip goats apart all the time. So, anyways, he rips this face of this lion apart, but he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Okay. Like, my kids have kept lies from me sometimes, but never like, hey, Mom, Dad, I forgot to tell you. And I ripped apart the face of a lion. So he keeps this to himself. Then he went down and talked with the woman. And he liked her. So this guy, there's no reasoning with him. Like, you don't like, hey, we need to have an intervention. We need to talk about some roadblocks that could, possibly, if you date this girl, can I deter you? Can we? See, he's the kind of guy that once his cravings are engaged, like, he wants what he wants. And there's no getting in the way of that. Like, he gets to where he can't see straight. He gets to where eventually he won't be able to see at all. Not because of the fact that his eyes are going to be plucked out of his head, which happens. It's because he lost his vision. Somebody say, preach. He blinded himself. And in this story, you're going to find a man who his desire for pleasure and comfort and his cravings and his satisfaction, temporary satisfaction, trumped his calling and the power of God that was in his life. Have you ever done that? Have you ever just gone, man, I want something so bad that there's just all logic's out the door. It doesn't matter what you say to me. You can try to convince me. I've thought about the consequences. I know I could lose everything. I know my reputation's on the line. I know I could lose my job. I know I could lose my marriage. But you're not going to change my mind because I want it. Well, that's where Samson finds himself. He has these misplaced desires, is what I call them, and misplaced needs. And those needs, they lead him down this destructive path that leads to his undoing. And I say misplaced because, hear me, the desires in and of themselves, they're not bad. The needs given to you are placed there by God. We have real yearning and lust, and we want something bad. But God made us. It's his design. And he didn't mess up, I might say. And when he created you, he made you to yearn. But he just wants you to yearn for him more than the cravings that we have in this world. See, when we think about our yearnings, we all have a choice to make. And you can either choose to walk down the path that's going to lead to delighting in God, or you're going to walk down a path that's going to delight in your temporary cravings. And so I know we all have yearnings out. There's things I long for. I yearn for sugar. A lot of it. And I can just keep going. The whole bag's gone before I know it. Or chips, or things I can't afford. I'm like, baby, it's on sale on Amazon. Come on. Or a house that we can't afford, it's out of our budget, or a car, or even people that we go, I just have to have. So here's where he's at. He wants this girl. And it says in verse 8, we're only on verse 8, by the way. This is 8 verses down, and here's what it says. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, oh, okay, that's happening. He turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. Everybody, every campus, Woodbridge, let me hear you say, turned aside. Go ahead, let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. He turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, which the lion is dead. It's unclean. He knows he's not supposed to turn aside to go look at this. He made a covenant with God, a vow. And in it, in the lion, he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. So he scooped out the honey with his hands and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate it. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's dead body. That's so nice of him. He's so generous. Mom, Dad, check out this honey. It's so sweet. Enjoy. Forgetting to tell them, I killed the lion and I reached inside it. And the honey, I know it's kind of gross. It was in a dead body, but it's great. I don't know. It's just in the Bible. So here he is, knowing that he was not supposed to turn aside. I'm fixing to preach. Some of you, you're in the wrong lane to turn the right way. Some of you know on your way home from work this week, you could have the choice to go home or turn aside. And some of you will make the choice. 90% of the decisions we make is because we're in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? You go somewhere and you find yourself, I know I'm not supposed to be here, but it'll be fun. And he's like, turned the wrong way, somewhere he's not supposed to be. Can I say something to you that C.S. Lewis said? He said, don't let your happiness depend on something that you may lose. That's so profound. Don't let your happiness depend on something that you may lose. And so many of us long for some temporary thing that we're going to buy or take that's not ours. And we long for those cravings to give us satisfaction. And some of you need to hear me. You need to go home. You need to go home and love the people that you're called to love. Your affections don't belong over here on the temporary things. They belong to the people that you're called and have made a covenant with God to love. So go home. Don't be weak-willed. Stop loving things that don't belong to you. So maybe that's where Samson finds himself. His affections and his misplaced desires made him forget temporarily what his love really is. Or maybe he just got sick of the pressure. I can't handle all this. You guys depend too much on me. I'm not your deliverer. Stop calling me that. Like a pastor's kid. Like, I just want to do things bad sometimes. You guys all think I'm good. Well, I'm not. I smoke and chew and go with girls who do. All right? So stop judging me. And so that's exactly what he did. He goes and marries this Philistine. And at the wedding, he just makes a mess of everything. He starts drinking, which he's not supposed to do, right? So he's broken two of the covenants now, right? He touched something that was dead, and now he's drinking something of the vine. And he just chooses to make up some riddle with these dudes, 30 of them, at the wedding party. And he places this bet. I'm going to tell you a riddle. I'll bet you anything you can't figure it out. So his pride gets in the way, and it's boys being boys like, what up, sucker? You got this? And they're like, yeah, we got it. Tell us the riddle. So he makes up this riddle about the lion. Out of the eater comes something sweet. It's just dumb. And so he makes up this dumb riddle, gives them a bet, and he's like, it's a good riddle. And so he's like, gives them this story, and they can't figure it out. They're mad. So they go to his future wife and like, hey, if you don't tell him to tell us the riddle, if you don't get it from him and tell us, then we're going to kill you and your dad. And so she's like, okay, I'll go to him. And she starts trying to get the information from him. It's not working. She's trying. So she does something that's very powerful and very effective. She starts crying. And she's crying. And Samson's a mighty man. But that was his weakness. And so he's like, okay, I'll tell you. So he tells her, and you know what she does? She goes straight to the guys, like, don't kill my dad, and don't kill me, okay? Here's the riddle. Here's what it means. And then they come to him, Samson, the 30 guys, and like, hey, man, we know your riddle. And they tell him, and so now he bucks up. He's all mad. His pride gets in the way. And here's what Samson says to them. He says, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. I'm just reading the Bible. Gentlemen, can I talk to you for a second? So, Samson's an idiot. And on his wedding week, he calls his bride a heifer. It's never a good choice. And don't accuse her of plowing with someone else. It's not good to say. Don't do that. The young man, I have 4 daughters and a wife, and I just know. And so he says this to them, and he's really ticked off that they figured out the whole thing. His pride's hurt, and so he's like, okay, the bet was to find clothes for all 30 of you. I'll go get your clothes. So he goes through the streets, and he finds Philistine men and murders them and strips them naked and takes the clothes to them and says, here's your clothes. What? I don't know. God gave him power to kill these men for their clothes. That happened. I don't get it. Don't ask me. And so now they're mad, the Philistines, and so they go to his wife and his dad, like, you killed 30 men. Like, you can't do that. So here's what it happens. I was so sure. So Samson goes to his soon-to-be father-in-law and says, hey, I want to talk to my wife. And his father-in-law says, no, you can't. And here's what he says. I was so sure that you hated her that I gave her to your companion. I'm sorry? You gave my wife to my friend? Yeah, Bobby. They live up on the hill now, and they're really happy. Oh. And then he says, to make it all better, isn't her younger sister more attractive? How about my other girl? Like, here she is. She's pretty. Take her instead. No, Dad. I don't want you to be my dad anymore. And so Philistines, he's ticked at them. He's like, you people you're going to pay. And I'm justified for what you've done to me. Like, they did no. He made up a dumb bet. He made a riddle. And he caused all this. It's his fault, to be clear. And so he's like, oh, that's it. I'm going to wreak some havoc up in here. And so the Philistines went up, and after they find out all this, after he killed the 30 men, he went up and burned her, Samson's wife, and her father to death. So Samson said to them, since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you. He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Edom. What? So he's made a mess of it, and now he's killed these 30 men. And the reason why they're so stinking mad at him is because Samson's like, I'm going to wreak havoc up in here. And he goes and catches 300 fox. I don't know. And he lights them on fire. And these foxes go throughout all the fields and burn down the vineyards and burn down the wheat fields. And now the Philistines have no sustenance because he caught 300 fox and lit them on fire. That's just in the Bible. And so they're mad. They're like, you killed our men, and you're sitting down in that cave. And so now what was just a bet, just a riddle, it turns into like this, it breaks on Channel 5 News, right? And this is like it's turned into like national security. And these Philistines, I just said that. Anyways, the Philistines, they If you're Filipino, I'm sorry I did that. I'm an idiot. And so the Philistines, they're like, go on this warpath now. And they go straight to Israel, and they're going to kill the Israelites. And the Israelites are like, hey, what's up? Why are you here? What do we do? Like, well, Samson burnt down our fields, so he killed his wife and his dad. And he killed these other 30 dudes, and he's just made a mess. So we're going to war. And they're like, hold up. So you really just want Samson, right? They're like, yeah, we want Samson. Go subdue him and bring him to us in chains. So the Israelites get together like, we're going to go down to the cave and just get him, right? What's their plan? We're just going to tie him up. How many people should we take? I don't know, 50? No, that's not enough. 100? No. So they choose Israel, his people. Say, let's go down and get him, and we'll bring 3,000 men. And they walk up to the cave like, hey, Samson, are you in there, buddy? So Samson comes out. He's like, yeah, what? Or maybe, what do you want? Anyways. And so they say, you burnt down their fields? Yeah, I did. I caught a bunch of fox. Really? You know how you're like supposed to be our deliverer? Well, you're not doing that. And they're here to fight us, and they're going to go to war with us. So we really want to give you to them and kind of be done with you because you're not our deliverer, and you've caused a lot of problems. And he says, okay, listen, just don't kill me yourselves. You can tie me up if you just promise not to kill me yourselves. So they tie him up. They walk him out into the field, and he walks up to the Philistines, and I kind of see this as like a scene from Gladiator. His long hair. He reaches down, he puts dirt in his hand, and he picks up a donkey's jawbone. Let me show you. The Spirit of the Lord came on him in power. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax when he walks out to them, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Oh, they had swords and all their armor. He's like, unfortunate for you, I found a jawbone of a donkey. You're going to die. Then Samson said, this is what he says. With a donkey's jawbone, I've made donkeys of them. Now, in the King James Version of the Bible, it's a different word for donkey, and it reads a lot funnier. I better not say what it is, though. I'll get in trouble. So, he's just messing around. He's just like this, looks like a mater. It's just a big joke to him. He's not thinking about consequences, right? He's not. He doesn't realize he's the deliverer. Like, come on, act like it. There's one story. I wasn't going to tell you this, but I'll just tell you real fast. He goes to see a Philistine woman who's a prostitute, and he sleeps with her. And while he's doing that, some men come to subdue him and kill him. They're right outside waiting for him that night. They're sleeping around where he's at. And he wakes up and sneaks out. He's like, I got an idea. And he goes and picks up the city gates for the entire Philistine people. And he walks it 30 miles. Walks it. And puts it on top of a hill. He's like, that's funny. I have no idea why he did that. He just took their city gate. Anyway, so don't ask me why. It just kicks and grins, right? Right after that, the story reads that he goes and meets another girl that is a Philistine woman, and this might be the only part of the story that you might only know. If you know the story of Samson at all, some of you might like, yeah, isn't that girl that slept with that one girl? What's her name? Can we all sing it together? Delilah. Okay. That was so dumb. I'm sorry I did that. Anyway, so he goes and this girl like says, hey, just tell me why you're so strong. And he tells her, if it's these ropes, if you use these certain ropes, I won't be. And he tells her, again, that didn't work. And can you tell me another one? And it's like, oh yeah, if you do these chains. And then chains him up. Well, Samson, wake up. They're here to get you. This happened 4 times. Like 3 times she's lied and said, I won't tell nobody. And she does. And I don't know why the 4th time made her decide, oh, I'll just tell you the truth. But he does. And he's like, if you cut off my hair. And so she does. And then it's like one of the saddest verses in the whole Bible. It says in verse 20, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and I'll just shake them free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. And so they capture him, they burn his eyes, and they gouge out his eyes. And they actually take him and put him with the donkeys. And he has to like go around in circles, grinding the grain, just for like, I don't know how long. He's just with all of the donkeys. And again, that's really funny in the KJV. He's just round and round. And the people there just completely make a mockery of him. They're like, the mighty Samson, grinding grain with the donkeys. Samson's story is this principle that just because you failed at something doesn't mean that you're a failure. I might say that like this. A failure is an event in our lives. It's never a person. And some of you have taken on the failure that you've done as if you're a failure. So here's Samson in the middle of this place going, God, I know you probably don't love me anymore and you could probably never use me again. And some of you might find yourself there. Can I tell you that just because you're down doesn't mean you're out? You might find yourself in a prison alone and your vision's gone, and you continually just beat yourself up, and you're in a dark place, focused on all of your wounds. But don't lose hope, because in that moment of thinking you've wasted your life and your talents on nothing, God still has a plan. So one day the Philistines, they are worshiping their god Dagon, and there was like 3,000 to 5,000 people there in this big Colosseum. And in verse 25, it says, while they were all in high spirits, they shouted, hey, bring out Samson to entertain us. So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. So he's out performing, and you can just imagine Samson's like, how did I get here? I've never been so low in all of my life. Like 100% publicly shamed. And my people, they're done with me. My family, they're done with me. Everybody's turned their back on me. And in this moment, Samson starts to just play over all the stupid things he's done. And he's saying, I can't unsay what I said. Maybe you're there today. I can't undo what I've done. I can't unsleep with who I slept with. But here's what happens to Samson, and maybe it'll happen to you. Here's what you can do. You can turn back to God, and you can surrender, and you can say, I'm going to wake up to your will for my life and stop trying to do things on my own will. I'm going to recognize that you're the living God, and I want to give you everything that I am. And Samson does that. He's like, I'm not made to just be a mockery and just to be entertainment. I'm made and created to do something significant. I'm made to use supernatural greatness that God's given me so that I can help people find a deliverance. And so he starts to wake up to that. And he starts to go, it's time to turn around. And maybe you would remember that as well. maybe you would remember that you were made by God to do great things for God. You're not what you did. And that stuff that you've done doesn't need to be the trajectory of your future. Maybe you need to be done with the past and shake it free and say, that's not the way I'm gonna do things anymore. And like Samson, you might say, I might die in the process, but I'm gonna stop living for things that won't last. And I'm gonna die with honor, and I'm gonna live my life for the one thing that really matters, and that's God's purpose for my life. In spite of our past failures, God can and He will still accomplish His future promises and purposes if you'll allow Him. Let me say it like this. If we allow our needs, our brokenness and our wounds and our real needs, even our yearnings to drive us to God, God will meet our deepest need. He does. That's what He's always done for His people. And so here's Samson, and he finds himself going, man, I'm at the bottom of the bottom. And he takes this little boy's hand. He's completely blind. He's stumbling, and he literally says to the boy, listen, when they stood him among the pillars, Samson says to the servant who held his hand, put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple so I can lean against them. So he walks up to the pillars and he makes this beautiful prayer and he says, oh, sovereign God, would you please use me just one more time? Would you consider your servant and use me one more time? I love that. I can see the brokenness in him and the shame. It's fallen off of him. And he's like, I know what I've done. I know I've messed things up. But God, I'm finally seeing that I've made a mess of my whole life. And I'm ready now to stop being about my own needs, and I'm going to be about your mission. I'm going to be about the things that you brought me here to do. And so now everything he has, his time, his money, his very life itself exists to fulfill the mission of God. And even though everyone's turned their back on him, he's saying, God, I think maybe you can still use me. Can I just say to you that your history only describes what happened. It doesn't decide what will happen. Only God gets to decide what will happen. And so can I say that another way? Just because you're down doesn't mean that you're done. And so Samson finds himself between those pillars, and he just says he reached toward the two central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one, his left hand on the other. And then Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And then he pushed with all of his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. You know what's bizarre to me? In the writings of the New Testament, thousands of years later, the writer of Hebrews in chapter 11 talks about these people that came before us, these great cloud of witnesses, they call them, the heroes of our faith. Would you believe that this joker Samson made that list? There must be. God, you gave him grace, maybe there's hope for me, right? You would choose him to be a hero of our faith? That guy? I need you to hear something. God's placed supernatural power and greatness inside of you when he gave you the promised Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit, He gives us everything we need to learn what to say and what to do and how to fulfill God's purposes. And just because you've lost hope doesn't mean that all hope is lost. If you're not dead, God's not done. And there's more in you. And I want you to stop listening to the chatter in your head that says, man, I've not, and I shouldn't have, and I just have this remorse of the past that just beats yourself up. I'm never going to be, and you know the way they think of me. They're never going to trust me again. I can't go home. My family hates me. I've lost. My reputation's destroyed. And can you just stop? Stop listening to that. Start listening to the voice of God that's alive inside of you. And then you'll recognize the same Spirit of God that raised Christ from the dead is still alive inside of me. And it's time to be the person that God planned for me to be. It is never too late. God can restore you. He will redeem you. He will repurpose you. He will make you brand new to do the mission that you came here to fulfill if you'll allow your needs to drive you to God instead of allowing those needs to do things that are foolish. He can change you. Some of you need to just walk up to some pillars in your life and recognize you're not going to control me anymore. The drugs have no power over me. These people, they're horrible for me. And you need to push the pillars down and allow that old person to die so you can become the person that God called you to be. Wake up. It's time to go home. It's time to live the way God's called you to be and be the person that He's anointed you to become. Come on, somebody. That is the truth. So, Samson's story is hard to hear, and it's messy, but so are our lives. But isn't it good to know that we can go to God and He will give you grace and mercy and love and still choose to use you? Will you guys pray with me? Father, thank you for reminding us today that not all things are lost, that just because of the brokenness and the wounds and the things we've done, you still want to use us. We pray, Father, that we would be a beautiful reflection of you in this world, that people would understand you better because of the way we live. I pray we would walk in the calling and the power of your Spirit so people could find you and experience hope. Thank you, Lord, for sending your Son, Jesus, so that we could be redeemed and forgiven. We ask that you would forgive us. We're sorry, Lord. Would you wash us and make us pure? Would you give us strength again to walk according to your will? Would you allow us to study your scriptures and find you? Would you gather godly people around us and guide our steps so that we can bring about the change that you've called us to bring? We love you, God, with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and with all of our mind, and with all of our strength. It's in your name we pray. Everybody said, amen, amen.